In your opinion, who is the biggest psychopath of all time and why? Oscar de la Hoya, the guy managed to get fired from a concentration camp for mistreatment of prisoners. Rumor is that the Wehrmacht had a bounty on his head. The de la Hoya Brigade was an SS unit comprised of criminals and others that would have been mentally or morally unfit for service. They were expected to die, and oh boy did they ever. Other SS units would often refuse to fight with them or cover them, so they were often used to terrorize civilians. It is funny that people are listing known serial killers. These guys have such rookie numbers they wouldn't even get on the leaderboard. You want to talk about successful psychopaths? Look at the leaders of countries or corporations. Like Stalin, who had most of his senior generals executed in the middle of a world war because he was afraid that they would challenge his power, or Pol Pot, who ordered the killing of millions of his own people. I'm sure that there is better examples, but think about the C-suite of Ford Motors that knew that there was a probability that the Pinto would explode due to a rear collision, but they calculated the cost of redesign and compared it to the possible number of fiery deaths and decided doing nothing was cheaper. Or the executives at Exxon who were told in the 1970s that the ongoing burning of fossil fuels would, within a century, render large areas of the earth incapable of supporting human life. Rather than using their expertise, massive capital and the first mover advantage to make a rapid transition to renewable energy, they chose instead to spend $1 billion a year funding PR firms pushing climate change and Ireland lobbying governments to slow down action on climate change. Now that is some high-level psychopathic behavior. Or Union Carbide, where a leak at their Bhopal chemical factory killed and maimed thousands of people. Instead of dealing with the issue and compensating people, they used lawyers and the courts, and every nasty tool in the world to avoid responsibility. For decades. Or here in Australia, where the executives of the company producing asbestos products knew in the 1920s, warned by doctors employed by the company, that their workers were dying slow, horrible deaths from asbestosis. So they paid off the doctors to keep their mouths shut, bribed, and, if that didn't work, threatened workers who got sick, and when it finally made it to the court, used every tactic available to them to keep delaying trials in the knowledge that the people suing them would die before the case got to trial. Now those are psychopaths. Heinrich Himmler. Himmler was responsible for conceiving and implementing the Holocaust. He also made sure that the death trains ran on time and that the camps adhered to strict standards of murderous efficiency. Yay. Psycho. King Leopold II, what he did in Congo was absolutely heinous and devilish. So heinous that the British Empire, who at the time were the villains of the era to a lot of people, had to step in to stop him. Even going so far as to ask their rivals in Europe at the time to put the pressure on Belgium. Important to note that the British government had abolished slavery by 50 years at that point. Christian missionaries returning from Africa made the British government aware of what was happening in the Congo, and they did not take the reports seriously at first, as it sounded too cruel to be true. Yes. You read that correctly. The British government of the 1800s read the reports of what was happening and their response was surely not. That's how ducked up it was. And as Bering Breivik definitely takes the cake for me. Blow up a bomb in the center of Oslo. Meanwhile went to an island where a politic youth gathering was taking place. Dressed up as a cop he would kill 69 people on the island and call out to teenagers hiding, saying it was safe to come out. Those who believed his costume were shot. I was in Oslo that day with my family on a weekend trip. Walked across that square just hours before the bomb went off. Watching the news that evening was unreal. The one girl on an episode of Catfish who got called a fat ass Kelly Price by her cousin at some family event. She proceeded to pretend to be a man named Tony for 3 years, talking to the cousin online. Also talked to the cousin over the phone, changing her voice to sound like a man. Then she reached out to the show to help find Tony and revealed herself to her cousin at the last house they were checking, saying, "You should have never called me a fat ass." Kelly Price edit. Changed fat to fat as. H.H. Holmes. I mean, he built a hotel specifically to murder and conceal his victims. He had a bunch of secret passageways and trapdoors that only he knew about. He had airtight vault to lock up his victims and suffocate them, secret room with no doors to starve off victims, torture rack in the basement, lab for human experimentation, hidden gas pipes to asphyxiate people in their rooms. He had a sophisticated system of door alarms for him to keep track of people's movements, a room dedicated to strangulation. The man was methodical and an efficient psychopath. Edmund Kemper was 6 feet 9 inches and around 300 pounds. He's still alive, and apparently an exemplary inmate. He was extremely intelligent and was only caught because he turned himself in. He requested the death penalty, but it was denied and he got 8 life sentences. Henry Kissinger. Along with all the genocides he aided in, the bombing campaigns that irreversibly damaged Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam, and the mass implementation of wiretaps, he also committed treason with Nixon in 1968. Kissinger was likely to be Secretary of State for either Nixon or Humphrey, and actually preferred Humphrey. However, just to be sure he got the gig, when he got wind that LBJ was offering to halt bombing operations in North Vietnam to get them to the table for peace talks, he went to Nixon and informed him of the potential deal to get in good with Nixon. In response, Nixon opened up back-channel communications with South Vietnam and informed them that this was the offer LBJ was making. Naturally, South Vietnam didn't want a halt to the bombing and pulled out of peace talks. LBJ didn't get a peace deal that would have assured Hubert Humphrey the presidency, and Nixon got the chance to be the guy that ended the war. In doing so, they also extended the war by 7 years and got millions more people killed. The LBJ administration discovered this and decided not to prosecute the Nixon administration or Kissinger because they feared it would lead to a crisis of faith in the American government if the treason became public. So, the war was extended just so Nixon could get elected. The worst part? Kissinger wasn't even privy to the actual conversations being had between LBJ's White House and the North, so he did all of this off of assumptions and educated guesses. Again, just to get a gig that was his second choice. Genghis Khan. He once ordered an entire city razed and the heads of its citizens stacked into a pyramid. All because his ambassador was insulted. Then there's Vlad Tepes, better known as the Impaler, or Dracula, who used to eat while hearing the tortured moans of his victims as they slowly died on spikes. To ensure the Turks refused to attack, he captured an entire army and impaled them along the route into Transylvania. I forget all of their names, but one dude got hit with a duck-ton radiation and lived, so this group of scientists wanted to study him. He was in immense pain and was kept alive off of Drew Gus and life support. He was yelling in pain the last 100 days of his life, and out of pity or natural causes he died, but it is estimated he felt the most pain of anybody ever recorded. His family wanted him kept alive. People always blame the doctors, but at that point. King Leopold II of Belgium. Easily one of the worst people to ever live. Used Congo as his own slave nation, utilizing systematic brutality, torture and murder to enforce farming of ivory and rubber for his personal enrichment. He was probably responsible for the deaths of half the population. Ted Bundy. He was pure evil, yet still able to control his actions in a sophisticated enough manner to go undetected for years. When he wasn't raping and mutilating dead corpses, he was just a normal guy walking among the people. I was gonna say Bundy as well. I mean, there are a lot of psychopaths out there, you could pick a lot of names. But Bundy is well known. It's not just that he killed so many people, that he bit women's nipples off and had sex with corpses in all stages of decay. That's part of it though, for sure. But he was so nice to people in other areas of his life. He wasn't just an aggressive, violent person who lacked self-control. He had the capability of being a successful lawyer, or being popular, of making many women love him or want to be with him. He even was a successful suicide hotline worker at one point. He could have picked so many other jobs, other volunteer work, if it were just about image. But he chose this one, and he was so good at it. I think he enjoyed that it made him look good. But I think he enjoyed that he had the power to save lives, to manipulate people into not killing themselves. Doesn't mean he cared about them, but he still enjoyed it. He could have had a regular life. He didn't want one. Nothing was going to give him as much fulfillment as violently killing and raping people. It's a certain kind of pathology when you have that kind of lack of empathy for people, but you have cold empathy and you are smart enough not only get along with people, but you actually have more social skills than most people. Better people pleasing skills. Not everyone is built like that. Most people are capable of doing evil things given the right circumstances, but not everyone is a sociopath. Not sure the biggest, but Lane's Angels of Death are up there. Maria Gruber, Irene Liedolf, Stefana Jemaya, and Waltraud Wagner were 4 Austrian women who worked as nurses aides at the Geriatrizentrum am Wienerwald and Lanes, Vienna, and who murdered scores of patients between 1983 and 1989. The group held their victims with overdoses of morphine or by forcing water into the lungs. How did they kill 49 people over 5 years through premeditated action and still get released from prison for good behavior after serving less than 20 years? Stuff like this is why the USA has not gotten rid of the death penalty or excessive penalties. People are too afraid of serial killers or violent offenders being released. Jimmy Savile. Dude managed to get a knighthood from the royal family while sexually assaulting thousands of UK children back in the 80s, a ducking beast. Genghis Khan, because he and his army killed so many people it dropped the temperature of the earth, and he raped so many women that 1 in 200 Chinese people alive today are his descendants. I think we sometimes forget that psychopaths are not just serial killers, they're also war generals, police, soldiers, doctors. I mean, there's that UK nurse that held 300 plus patients and many others that did do similar. Seers today, I'd argue that most seers are psychopaths, and so on. Vlad the Impaler had over 100,000 people executed by impaling them over sharp sticks. Well, if your name is Vlad the Impaler, you don't have many options with what you can do with your life. The entire Japanese military in World War II. Some of the shit they did was absolutely horrific. But on Death March, Unit 731 Experimental Facility, Burma Railway Construction, Sukching Massacre, Changjiao Massacre, Pearl Harbor, just to name a handful. Mass rape, public execution, slaughter of civilians, horrible treatment of POWs, the Japanese in WW2 committed atrocities comparable to Nazi Germany. The Japanese war machine during WWII were a fascinating death cult. I mean, they literally believed their emperor was a god. Not figuratively. Literally. Those who fought against them spoke about how they would literally never surrender and fight to the death. How else do you explain kamikaze pilots other than calling it a death cult? It was pretty nuts. China, for being such a massive country, I feel like always gets overlooked in its history in WWII. Largely because it was essentially starting a civil war at the same time, and the invading Japanese turned the tides in that war. I never hear about the atrocities the Japanese carried out on other nations they took over. I wonder what histories are lost on those island nations. Israel Keys. Dude picked people at random to kill and planned it months in advance. Would travel to places and hide a hill bucket and come back months later to kill. He hid hill buckets in the woods where I smoked weed in college. While I was smoking weed there in college, I drive past the hotel he stayed in and the properties where he held a couple and hid their bodies all the time. Jeff Bezos keeps his employees in poverty to amass more wealth. He lets people work themselves to death. If you ask me, billionaires are all psychopaths. At the very least, they're hoarders. The Zodiac, he is in my opinion the biggest psychopath. He murdered for no reason, went on one of the biggest killing sprees in history and was never caught. His identity was never even found out. He's the definition of psychopath, half bloodlust, half genius. Casey Anthony. Hear me out, please. I know there are some real prolific serial killers being mentioned in this thread, and her crime, as horrible as it was, is Mother Goose by comparison. But there is a reason why I bring her up. Not many people are aware of how she lives today. Sometime after her trial, she moved to my city, and I suppose she never came out. But then a few years ago, all of a sudden, she's bar hopping. One day she's suddenly popping up all over the place and acting normal. And not only is she bar hopping, but she's perfectly content with complete strangers approaching her and recognizing her, like they are acquaintances. You know how sometimes you see a regular at the bar, and you make chit chat? Well, that is what she does with people who only approach her. She is 100% aware of how you know her. She knows you saw her on trial, and seems to take it as a compliment and have bar talk when you go back and watch her interrogations. You see her being cordial with the people trying to throw her in jail. Her ability to lie and be comfortable lying is just psychopathic. I think she does the same shit with people at the bar. She knows you know who she is, and she is going to act cool, like she doesn't care. Mitch McConnell. Because gestures to everything. Or Roger Ailes, founder of Fox News, knew exactly what he was creating, did it 100% intentionally, and then fortified his home and family against the fallout, which to him meant inevitable nuclear war. Literally built a bunker under his house for when the country collapsed due to his propaganda network. The American government. Specifically the GOM testing on my Marshallese Island neighbors. Between 1946 and 1958, the United States did 67 nuclear tests in the Marshall Islands. The US conducted 23 of these tests at Bikini Atoll, and 44 near Inuitak Atoll, but fallout spread throughout the Marshall Islands. Dropped a bomb that was 1,000 times more powerful than what we dropped in Japan. The radiation alone has made the Marshallese people cancer prone and so many health risks.